Welcome back to the Relationships Made Simple for Men podcast with me, Bryce Bauer. Today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that may be controversial, so I want to get some things out of the way. First, I'm not advocating that people do not have children. Being a parent is a beautiful and valid experience. I just want to share some of the things I wish I had known going into the decision of whether or not to have kids. Number two, I'm not an idiot. I know that we need to reproduce in order for the human species to continue to thrive, or at least not die out. I'm aware that declining birth rates could become quite a problem. We see this in China, where they had a one-child policy for a long time, and now the population is projected to decline by like 50% in the next few decades. And three, I'm not one of those people that think the world is such a terrible place that we shouldn't keep bringing children into it. I actually have a lot of hope for the human species, despite all the news out there that might try to be telling us otherwise. Now that I've been able to plant those flags, I also want to say that if you have anything negative to say or you want to push back, I'm happy to respond, but don't just read the title and react to that. Actually go and watch the whole video. It's probably best that I share a little bit about my story so that you know where I'm coming from. Initially, when Jenny and I first started dating, I think it was in the first month, we started talking about future plans, what we wanted out of a relationship. And I think everyone should do this, talk about some of these big things in the beginning, because you don't want to get further into a relationship and then figure out that you're really not on the same page around some of these bigger topics. And one of the most important things to talk about is family planning. So I remember talking to Jen, and it wasn't a super serious talk. It was just kind of an on the couch chat. And I mentioned that I wanted to have kids one day. I had always imagined that being a part of my life. I wasn't in a huge rush, but I knew at the time that that is what I wanted to do. And when I could tell that Jenny was more reluctant, granted, she was 35 at the time and she knew that her window was closing soon, I realized I wanted to ask her about that. And she said that she wasn't quite sure. Prior to meeting me, she had come to the realization that she might never have kids or may never even get married. And she wanted to make space for that to be okay. She had made peace with some of these outcomes. And I remember telling her, this is something I really want. So I need this to be an option if we're going to move forward in the relationship. And it's not like this was an argument or really an ultimatum, although people could frame it that way. It was just a really honest conversation. Jenny handled it really gracefully. She said she wanted some time to think about it. And after a week or so, she came back to me and said, if we can create a really strong partnership and marriage, yes, I'd be willing to put that on the table again. And looking back, I can see how I kind of, in my head, made that a yes across the board. So fast forward, we get engaged, we get married, and I want to start trying for kids right away. I was excited. Initially, Jenny wanted to wait for a few months, which was totally fair. And then we went into trying to have children. Just like most people, we had no clue what was going to happen, how long it would take, any of that. I think I had Googled that on average, it takes couples 6 months to get pregnant. So we both agreed that we weren't going to go in and do any testing or really look at any other measures until the 6 month mark. We hit the 6 month mark with no luck, so we decided to go in and talk to a fertility doctor, do some tests, and partially because of Jenny's age, I think she was 38 at the time, some of her levels were low. I've forgotten a lot of the terms and acronyms, but basically we were doing tests. I was giving Jenny shots to help with some of her levels. We were trying to time things as best we could. We were basically just trying to do all the things that were being suggested. I don't think either of us were feeling that stressed about it at the time. And Jenny actually did get pregnant after about a year of trying. We were both excited. We couldn't wait. We ended up telling our families, even though she was very early on. I was so stoked to be a dad. Just like a lot of couples, all of a sudden we're starting to orient our life around this new experience. We were in the process of building a new home up in Salt Lake City. We were spending the winter in Arizona because we don't like cold weather. And so everything seemed to be lining up perfectly. But after a few days, Jenny starts having some stomach pains, some cramping, some bleeding, all the symptoms of a miscarriage. And so we go into the hospital and they run some tests, check her, and they're like, yeah, this probably is a miscarriage. And that's where things began to shift a little bit. I wasn't really feeling disappointed. I was feeling more optimistic because we proved that Jenny could get pregnant. It was just about how to keep the embryo, the baby, alive in the womb. And so I saw this as good news. But again, this was not my body. I was not having to go through this firsthand. And for Jenny, this was really, really hard. And it was at that point that I think she kind of started to explore the idea of not trying anymore, at least in her mind. I don't think she was really saying that out loud yet. So we gave it a shot for a few more months, and then we started to explore the idea of newborn adoption or foster care. We even completed both of the trainings, because they're separate trainings, over the course of the next 6 months. And right at the end, I could kind of feel Jenny pulling back some. I felt like I was kind of the one driving it and holding the excitement. And she was being honest with me. She was telling me that she was scared and bringing in her concerns. But looking back, I think I did kind of have blinders on. And this all came to a head one day. We had moved into our new house and we sat down on the couch, and she ended up telling me, I realize I do not want to have kids in any shape or form that they would come in. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, because in that moment, I was completely stunned and confused. It's like my brain could not process the information that was coming in. It's like I believed that I would have children no matter what. It had already kind of been ingrained into my identity at a young age. And I loved Jenny and I loved her marriage. And then she's telling me that she doesn't want to have kids. And those two things do not go together. My brain was like, this does not compute. And this was a really hard couple of weeks for our marriage, maybe the hardest couple of weeks that we ever had. We reached out to a therapist on the East Coast who specializes and wrote a book on the baby decision. And she was so, so helpful. She is a mother herself. She also had a really skillful way to bring in compassion for both sides of this experience. And some of the things that I had to confront were the grieving that either way, it did not seem like we were going to have biological children. She even had me write a letter to our unborn child, which I cried so much over. It was like that whole experience finally hit me. It had been delayed, but the sadness and the loss actually hit me when I wrote that letter. And then we began to explore some of the different ideas and ways of looking at not having kids, which I really hadn't thought about at any point in my life. So I think that's a good segue into me making the case for not having kids. And one thing that I realized that I think a lot of couples probably feel too is that we live in a very pro-natalist society. Most people assume that all couples are going to have kids. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been asked when someone's cutting my hair or I'm meeting someone for the first time and they ask me if I have kids and I say no, and they'll say something like, oh, well, it'll be great when you do, or it'll happen one day, or they'll ask when we plan on having kids, as if there's no other option. And I've had this conversation enough times that I know how to deal with it. Like, no, we actually chose not to have kids. And most of the responses, I would say, are positive. Most people are supportive and they say, oh, good for you. Or, yeah, I know kids can be a handful. It makes sense that you made that decision. It's not like they always really get it, but they kind of validate it or kind of get it. And it is true that about 90% of married couples do end up having kids. So I realize that this 10% gets missed if you're hedging your bets. 9 out of 10 couples that you ask are either having kids or are planning on having kids. But it is weird to be the minority that gets missed. I do feel unseen sometimes. And I've talked to other couples that feel this too. And that might be you. And there are stories that tend to circulate around what having kids means for your life. One is that once you have kids, then you get to have grandkids and you watch this family tree grow. And that is really fulfilling. Your family becomes like an extension of you, a physical representation that you can see and interact with. And that is cool. I know my dad made some comment where he said, yeah, who's going to take care of you when you're older? Referring to me not having kids. And I probably just have a different way of looking at this because I don't think it's a child's job to take care of their parents into old age. They can if they want, that's great, but it's not an obligation. I mean, my dad took care of his parents more financially because they were out of state when they were getting older and struggling with dementia and health issues, but he wasn't really physically there. And so I don't think that's a great reason to have kids, just to have some security that you'll be taken care of going into old age. And this might be hard for some people with kids to understand because that's the only experience they've had. My parents had me and my sister, and I think they love us very much. There's no way they would wish us to not be here or to live a life without us if they could go back in time. But the thing that I realize is that you can live a fulfilling life no matter what you choose. A lot of people find that through their children and through parenthood, but you can also find that in your marriage and in your work and in your community and really ultimately with yourself. And it's the reality that kids can die before their parents. Kids can be a huge pain in the ass. I have no doubt that at some point in my teenage years, my parents probably second guessed having kids just because of the strain that I put on them and their marriage and our household. It's a reality that not having kids means you don't have to go through that. You don't have to roll the dice. You don't have to risk having a kid that may be dependent on you for their whole life for some reason. Not to say you can't make that into a great experience too, but the idea that you'll automatically have a healthy, happy, independent child that grows into an adult and has grandchildren, there's no guarantees there. And that was probably one of my biggest concerns of all, is having a child that really struggled in their life or who we had to take care of for the rest of their life. There's a real possibility that that can happen. I know people in all of these situations. One thing that parents will not get to experience is what it's like to just have each other and have lots of free time and get good sleep, like almost every night, to not have to track a child's needs and tend to their tantrums, because so much focus goes to kids, especially when they're younger, and that's less attention for your marriage. And so that is part of the reason why Jenny and I can do what we do, is because we don't have kids and we can give each other a lot of attention. And I tell our couples this, I'm like, don't compare your relationship to ours because our situation is different. I'm not saying it's better. We just have more time. We have more resources to give to the relationship. Another really interesting thought experiment that helped me with the baby decision was when the therapist introduced this idea that all adults will eventually become empty nesters. We are just a little bit early to that experience. And it's true. I'm watching my in-laws, I'm watching some of my friends as their kids grow up, and one day it will be just them again. Most likely, their kids will move out of the house, maybe move out of state, go to college, start their own families. And at that point, there will be more time for the adults to connect with just the adults. So even though sometimes Jenny and I can feel lonely because we live around a lot of young families and they either need to get a babysitter if they want to hang out, or only one of them can come and be in an event because the other one's watching the kids. It's kind of segregated in that way, men and women. One day that will change, and it's not that far away. I mean, I think about my parents, whom I get to see maybe 2 or 3 weeks a year because I moved out of state like 15 years ago. And so in reality, I don't think their life would be that different if I wasn't here, hypothetically. Kids just become less and less a part of your life as they grow up. And I know some grandparents might be really involved. I mean, my wife's parents are really involved with the grandkids, but a lot of people aren't. Like, I never got to know any of my grandparents. They just didn't seem to have an interest. So going back to this idea that by having kids, you can guarantee certain things, it's just not true. There's another idea that has really helped me in this process. And when I'm working with individuals and couples, I'll bring this in. And it's the idea that either way, whether you have kids or not, there's some things that you aren't going to be able to avoid. And one of those is grief. If you don't have kids and you did want to have kids, you will have to grieve the loss of that experience. You aren't going to watch a child grow up and go through life and have successes and failures and connect with them and bond with them, celebrate milestones, and see the world through their eyes. And on the other hand, if you do have kids, you will have to grieve the loss of all the space and time that you used to have with your partner because you can't have both. You won't be able to do what Jenny and I do, which is just leave the house whenever we want, turn the lights off, and go wherever we want and not worry about what's happening back home because it's just us. And so there's a loss of freedom there that parents will experience. And I know there's a whole spectrum. There are some parents that are so sure that they wanted to have kids and that this was the right decision for them. And there are some parents that we talk to that are like, yeah, I might not have had kids if I had been more informed or had time to think about it, or looking back now and seeing how hard this was because I didn't know. That's real. There's a whole spectrum. All of this to say, I think it's really important that everyone gets the opportunity to make space to make this decision from an informed place, from a compassionate place. And I don't think that our society does a good job of that because they just assume that this is what everyone has to do. Kids are not the only way to find fulfillment in life and to expand out into the world and to build connection and to build family. There are other ways to do this. Another weird wrinkle that I've experienced with people sometimes is that they assume that I don't like kids. And yeah, it's true that some people don't like kids, but I love kids. If we're at a family event or a community event, I feel more drawn to go hang out with the kids and play the games and watching the kids have their experience, which I find very interesting, than I do sometimes doing the normal chit chat with the adults. I love to play. I love to have fun. I think kids are fascinating. So that is definitely not the reason why I chose not to have kids. The final thing that I'll say on this topic is that if you do decide not to have kids and you feel judgment from your parents or your community or the world, I just want to let you know that you're not alone. This is a valid decision that you made, and they may never get it. It really does take work to get it and to want to get it, to understand you. And so it's important that you look for people that can help you feel supported in this decision if you're not going to have kids. You don't have to do this on an island. And if you do decide to have kids or you already have kids, great. I appreciate your service. I think parenting is a beautiful experience, and kudos for exploring another perspective and not just the one that you're having. I especially appreciate you for listening. Well, I think that's all I have to say about that. If you like what I have to say, remember to like, comment, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. If you want to look at working with Jenny and or I, you can go to www.brycebauer.com to find more info. That's all I got for today. Peace.